and we are now recording this session. So I'm going to start off today by sharing with you the screen and showing you the platform, the Canvas platform where your course is found. This is the home page of your Canvas platform course. I would encourage you to listen to all the videos that are on these pages. All the videos contain some very good, useful information. And here under modules, you will find the different modules of the program that as you work through. And be sure to work through from the beginning and complete every quiz as you go through the course. If you do not complete every one of these little quizzes, and they are marked automatically and immediately you get your mark back for these little quizzes along the way, these daily quizzes. If you do not complete all the quizzes, then you might find that you are not able to access future modules. They might be grayed out. You notice here it says complete one item in this module and complete one item in this module. If you don't complete an item, then the Canvas platform will be grayed out and you'll be blocked from continuing into further platforms. So always complete all of these little quizzes as you come across them. Work through the beginning, begin at the beginning of module 1 and work all the way through. Read all the pages. Use the next button at the bottom of each page to move on to the next item so that you don't miss any of the quizzes. I'd like to point out to you under this TESOL resources spot, this is in modules, it's right near the beginning of the module section. Under TESOL resources, there are many useful resources for you that you can certainly have a look at. But I would suggest two, particularly the TESOL Canada Handbook and the TESOL Manual. This is called Concepts and Skills Manual. You can download these, it's free download. You can download these and you can have them for reference. I downloaded both of them and I went through and highlighted different sections in them, and I used them when I was studying for the exams. So you might want to do the same thing. Again, the TESOL Manual and the TESOL Canada Handbook, those two documents are particularly crucial and important for you. Now, a brief little introduction to how do you deal with the Canvas platform. We're just going to expand this slideshow so that you can see it easily. And this is an introduction to the Canvas platform. When you go to your Canvas platform to set up your account, use the very same email address that you use to correspond with TESOL, because they track everything connected to you through your email address and your Canvas account. So you use your email address as your username and then create your password and log into your TESOL course that way. Review the Canvas homepage that I showed you a few moments ago. And once you begin the modules, work through them consecutively. Don't jump ahead. So if you're on module 1, don't try to jump to module 5 to do the work down there, because you're going to miss some of the quizzes along the way. Complete each quiz to ensure access to the next module, because the Canvas platform tracks your progress. If you cannot access a module or a quiz or any other administrative type questions, please send an email to Simon Baker at this email address. I'm sure you already have that email address. You've been corresponding with him already, I expect. So we'll go back to the Canvas platform in just a moment. But in any correspondence you have with TESOL, always use the very same email address that you used to set up your Canvas account. And when you submit assignments, always submit them from that same email address so that TESOL is able to track who is submitting things. If you sign into Canvas and set up your course application using one email address, but then you use a different email address to log into your to use a different email address to send them assignments, they won't be able to connect your two email addresses, and that has caused problems for students in the past. So be sure to always use the same email address for everything. Are there any questions about that, folks? Any questions about the Canvas account or getting set up, viewing the course? Any questions about it at all? Okay,
No, sir, thanks.
very good. Now we're going to begin our first PowerPoint connected to the actual course. And I'll just get this enlarged so you can see it better. There we go. So this is an introduction to second or foreign language teaching. TESOL stands for Teaching English to Speakers of Other Languages. Teaching English as a Second Language is TESL or TSL, Teaching Second Language. TFL or TOEFL is TEFL is Teaching English as a Foreign Language. So there are different approaches. What do you think is the difference between teaching English as a second language and teaching English as a foreign language? What's the difference between those two? Anybody?
I suppose it could be a third language or even than that, which makes a difference.
That's correct, Irina. It could be a third language that is being taught. That's right. But what's the difference between second and foreign?
Uh,
It
when
has to do with geography. Yes, go ahead.
yeah, when it's a second language, it means that you are in an English country, but you teach English to, for example, immigrants,
Yes,
like in Canada. But as a foreign language, it means that you are in a non-speaking English country or environment, and you teach English to students. And when they left the class, they are in their mother tongue environment, not English environment anymore.
that's exactly correct. Very well explained. Thank you very much. Nicely done. So, when we're looking at the course and teaching English as a second language, we have a number of considerations to look at. The homework that involves speaking tasks or listening to the radio or watching TV and reading newspaper articles. So when, as Shabnam said, when somebody is not in the classroom environment and they're using their mother tongue in a non-speaking English country, they can watch English, listen to English radio broadcasts, or they can watch English television programs. They can read English newspaper articles, that sort of thing. You should always encourage students to seek out opportunities for practicing the second language. In this case, we're talking about English, but it could be French, it could be Arabic, it could be Chinese, the second language, whatever it is. Students need to find opportunities to use that language, and encourage students to seek corrective feedback from others. So students must be open-minded to suggestions and recommendations that people give them for improving their English speaking communication and correcting any errors that they have. One useful tool is to have students keep a log or a diary of extra class learning. You can plan and carry out field trips. Now, around the world, the pandemic is getting to a point where things are opening up again, and it's possible to do field trips out of the classroom into museums or art galleries or other places, other types of businesses. But you can also do virtual field trips. You can do a virtual tour of many museums on the face of the earth. And that was certainly the way things were done during the pandemic. You can plan social mixers with native English speakers. Again, things are opening up now as we wind down the pandemic, hopefully, and people are beginning to mix together physically in the same location. But you can also hold Skype calls or Zoom meetings, and you can have conversation with native English speakers that way as well. I have some former TESOL students from the past couple of years. I have a group of ladies in Iran who I do Skype calls with on most Fridays, not every Friday, but most Fridays. And we just visit and we talk about many different topics. We talk about what we're doing in our lives. Some of them are still attending school, some of them are teaching school. They tell me about their classes, and we improve their English speaking ability. And oftentimes I will use words to describe something, and they will ask me what it means. And I do a quick Google search to show them an image of the item I'm talking about, or an explanation of the words that I'm using. And it becomes a mixer, becomes an English speaking social mixing situation, but it's through Skype. Because, of course, I'm in Canada near Toronto and they're in Iran. So obviously we cannot get together in the same room every week. That's just impossible. You can also invite English speakers to come into the classroom and give a presentation. Again, whether it's in person or whether you attend a class online, is dependent on the situation where you are positioned geographically, and it depends on the educational institution you're connected with. There are many cultural factors to keep in mind. Classroom applications include the following: discussing cross-cultural differences, emphasizing that no culture is better than another, but that cross-cultural understanding is an essential facet of learning a language. I definitely agree with that, and I also believe that if the whole world understood that no culture is better than another, and accepting people of different cultures and accepting their cultural heritage and accepting their cultural and religious beliefs, if we were more tolerant of each other, the world would be a better place to live in. Unfortunately, that's not a reality. But here at TESOL, we keep an extremely open mind, and we emphasize that all cultures, all religions are equal, and none is better than another. When you're teaching, include among your classroom techniques particular activities or materials that illustrate the connection between language and culture. I'm sure if you think about your own personal mother tongue, whatever country of your origin was, and then you think about your language connected to the culture that you've grown up in, you will see that there is a strong connection between language and culture. Teach your students that cultural connotations, especially of sociolinguistic aspects of language. There are some things that are accepted in some cultures that are not accepted in other cultures. Certain language references and certain behavior references. For instance, in Canada and North America and many Western English-speaking countries, greetings are often made by shaking hands, but in cultures such as the Japanese culture or the Chinese culture, greeting is often done by bowing to the other person. without actually having hand contact. Also, be sure to screen your methods for material that may be culturally offensive. You don't want to present anything that offends any of your students. When students have moved or immigrated to a new country, they go through a process we call acculturation. Can somebody give me a definition of what acculturation means? Anybody?
Yeah, it's taking in or assimilation to a different culture, uh, especially the dominant culture.
That's exactly correct. Thank you, Shabnam. Good answer. And while we're just talking about answering questions, I want to make sure that all of you understand that if you have a question at any point in time, or you have a comment related to the material, please interrupt me. I will not think you are being rude. I welcome interruptions because it gives an opportunity for you to share thoughts and ideas and ask questions that others might be thinking about as well. And I don't want you to be shy. So please jump in anytime. Simply say, excuse me, I would like to ask a question, or excuse me, I have something I would like to add. And I will welcome that definitely. So don't hesitate to do that at any point in time. In any situation that we encounter in life, we go into new situations with expectations. As teachers and students, we have expectations of each other. Students often expect teachers to have all the answers. However, that is seldom the case. I certainly don't have all the answers to every question. And teachers are allowed to say, I don't know. And then I would add, but let's figure out how we can find out the answer to your question. It is often thought that teachers are expected to suppress emotions. Also, students are expected to suppress emotions, but you're able to express emotions. Teachers and students are able to express emotions. So, when Shabnam gave some answers recently here, I countered with the comment that that was an excellent answer, very well explained. Thank you very much. So that's an emotional response of kindness for a job well done, and that's appreciated both ways. So if I appreciate a student's answer, I certainly want to let them know with a positive response. And you also can make positive comments to other students when they say something as well. This is intended to be a very interactive environment where you participate rather than just listening to my voice all the time. It's much more beneficial for each of you to hear each other talk about your experiences and make comments with your thoughts. The consideration that to interpret intellectual disagreement as personal disloyalty is not a good foundation for a sound teacher-student relationship. Differences should be interpreted as an interesting exercise for dialogue, conversation, discussion. You can always agree to disagree, for instance. Reward students for accuracy in problem solving or answering questions, and reward students for innovative approaches to problem solving. Those are key to making the environment of the classroom, this being our classroom, making the environment of the classroom a positive environment. If it's a positive, reinforced learning environment, then the students will remain better engaged and they will be much more able to move forward with their learning process. There is some thought that students should speak in class only when called out by the teacher, but I believe students should be encouraged to volunteer their thoughts. Teachers should never lose face. To do so also means losing the respect of students. Teachers can admit when they are wrong and still maintain the students' respect. If I make a mistake telling you some information, and then I admit that I was wrong with that information, you will have more respect for me than if I just let you continue with what I said, but it was wrong information. That's not a good way to proceed. Students expect the teacher to show them the way. Teachers expect students to find their ways. I don't believe fully in either one of these. I believe as a teacher that I should be a guide on the side. I should guide you along. I should offer you information, which is why I shared the Canvas platform, and we had a look at some different spots on the Canvas platform. But I don't plan to give you step by step through every day of the grammar exercises, for instance, as a self-study course, a self-paced course. That's up to you to study the material on your own. And if you have questions, certainly I will answer questions for you. But I expect you to work through the material as I guide you along through these different webinar presentations. Does anybody have any comments about these thoughts or any ideas or questions related to this? Anything at all?
Excuse me, sir. Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
I heard that if one of the students have a problem in solving, for example, some question exactly in some subjects like math, we have to give them some minutes to answer this question themselves. And then if they couldn't solve these questions, what can we do to, for example, solve these questions?
Do you mean if they're not able to do the calculation and get the correct answer?
Yes.
Well,
And we give them some minutes, they cannot solve these questions.
yeah, in that case, it's probably a situation where they do not understand the specific calculation process. So you would need to go back and repeat some instruction from an earlier class to make sure they understand the calculation process required.
Thanks. I got it.
You're welcome. So when you're asking students to solve a math problem like that, whether they're able to solve it or not, that is a particular type of assessment that you are doing along the way during a course. What is the name for that kind of assessment where it's just kind of a spot assessment along the way? What do we call that? Anybody? It's a type of formative assessment because it's along the way. It's part of the cumulative assessment process. At the end of a course, when you give an exam or a major test at the end of a curriculum unit, that is called a summative form of assessment. But along the way, you do formative assessments to test the student's knowledge and ability as you go through the course. We're now going to look at.
Sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just wondering if we are going to study uh, assessment types, because I know there are a few like short ones, intermediate, during like midterms, maybe once in a few months, once in a year. Are we going to look at these ones, or just we need to look at them by ourselves?
Well, we do talk about different types of assessment. There's
Yes,
pre-assessment, there's during assessment, and then there's post-assessment.
right.
So we do talk about them at various points along through the webinars, and they are also discussed in your your Canvas platform. They're also discussed in those two handbooks that I pointed out on the resource,
Yes.
the Concepts
All
and
right, thank
Skill
you.
handbook, as well as the TESOL
I know.
handbook. So be sure to have a look through those handbooks
Yes.
because that is also discussed in there. Okay, good question.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions before we move on, folks?
Daniel, I have a question. The course material, we'll have access to this. Is it a lifetime access?
You will have access to the course for 1 year to complete it, but I believe after you pass your final exam and you get your certification, I believe you do continue to have access to the course.
Yeah, and the course material. Okay, thank you.
And the course material, yes. And
Thank you.
after I finish with this PowerPoint in a few moments, I will show you where all these recordings are posted on the Canvas platform, because you can download these recordings from Canvas and you can keep them for future reference if you want to.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, because all these recordings are posted on Canvas.
Okay.
So now we're going to have a look at methodologies. This is in your first module. You'll come across methodologies and the history of methodologies. The oldest type of methodology is called grammar translation method, which used drills and memorization focused on reading and writing, the structure and vocabularies. It's also known as the classical method or the grammar method. This is the style of learning a second language that was used for many centuries, mostly for copying texts of classical writing. And in the Western world, we're talking about classical writing of Greek or Roman origin. But in other cultures, the Persian culture, for instance, or the Chinese culture, those cultures go back thousands and thousands of years, and written documents would be copied by learned scribes in order to learn another language of another culture. That methodology, the grammar translation method, that was in place for many centuries until the 1800s. In the 1800s, the direct method was developed. The direct method is very much like the naturalistic way of learning first language that children use. We all used, as young children, we all used the direct method to learn our first language. We didn't know it was called the direct method because we didn't know about methodologies when we were little babies learning our first language. But when we learned that mother tongue, it was all by conversation, focusing on pronunciation. There was no grammar structure. There were no drills and memorizations. It was all verbal. And where were we learning our first language? What was our environment? Each one of us, what was our environment? Anybody?
That was family, friends, specifically mom and dad,
That's
sisters,
exactly,
brothers.
yes, that's exactly right. Anybody in our home, anybody who was in our natural environment. It was all based on communication. So that direct method came along in the late 1800s, and then soon after it was developed as a style of learning a second language, a gentleman by the name of Charles Berlitz came along, and he said, I really like the direct method, but I don't want to use that name. And he gave his version of it, he gave it the name, the Berlitz method. He wanted his name on the method that he taught. But the Charles Berlitz method and direct method are really the same thing. That's fine. And during the early decades of the 20th century, in the early 1900s, the direct method fell out of popularity because it was very reliant on small classroom sizes. That was very expensive for educational institutions, so they switched back to the grammar translation method because that was easier to function with in a teaching environment, in a school situation. And that was fine until the 1930s, when the Second World War broke out. And in the United States, a method was developed known as the Army method. The Army method was developed because the United States military was sending its soldiers as military fighters into foreign countries, and they were sending their military personnel as spies into foreign countries. And they needed their soldiers, they needed their military people to be able to speak the foreign languages as though they were native speakers. And so they taught them using what was known as the Army method, and it focused on pronunciation and native speaking features. So the teachers of these classes would say phrases and they would speak in the foreign language, and the students learning that language would copy, they would mimic what was said. They would do verbal memorization drills. There was no grammar writing, that was only mimicry and focusing on correct pronunciation. Because of course, if they were going to a foreign country as a spy, they needed to speak as though they were a native speaker. Otherwise, they would be running into real problems, and they would risk their lives if they didn't sound native speaking in a foreign environment. So that became known as the audiolingual method, but it's very similar to the Rosetta Stone program. You might be familiar with the Rosetta Stone program. This company distributes discs. They sell discs that you can listen to a CD, and you can practice the pronunciation to learn a second language. So that's the audiolingual method that derived out of the Army method in World War II. In 1970, in the United Kingdom, a new methodology referred to as Notional Functional Syllabus, and we will look at that more closely in the future. You'll see it in your Canvas platform studies as well. The Notional Functional Syllabus was a methodology designed on functional communication, which was limited, but it was linked to two categories of functions, one category being general and one being specific. So general topics would be very large topics, such as topics that are topics that are not specific. So topics about outer space and topics that are very large conversations, general topics, whereas specific functions would be items linked to personal identification, for instance. So your name, your date of birth, your driver's license, that type of thing. It was basic conversation, but didn't really develop strong overall communication skills. That was in the 1970s. Then in the 1980s and 1990s, a new methodology emerged called CLT. CLT stands for Communicative Language Teaching. Now, this chart, which you will come across in those handbooks as well as on the Canvas platforms, you don't need to write this down. You'll come across it in the other material that you can look at. But the CLT was based on the main focus of it was the meaning is paramount. And it was taking any device which helps the learners to improve their communication skill. So the main focus was learning language to learn to communicate. This chart compares it with the audiolingual method because the audiolingual was focusing on the native speaker-like pronunciation pretty much exclusively. With CLT, comprehensible pronunciation is sought. That's a key goal of CLT, but it's not the overwhelming goal at the exclusion of every other aspect of it. So CLT also uses grammar exercises, if necessary, to help improve the language understanding of the individual. This is an excellent chart. When you find this in your TESOL handbook and TESOL manual, I would suggest that you keep this page as a separate item for reference, because you will be able to use this to help you prepare for various assignments. And we'll talk about your first essay assignment in a few moments. I'll show you where that is on the Canvas platform. But this is also a good reference for studying for the exams. Any questions so far, folks? Any questions about the methodologies? Pas de questions? Okay. CLT specifics, communicative language teaching specifics. It is learner-centered, focuses on learners' needs and goals. It gives some control to the student for group work, for example. It includes the input of students that do not presuppose objectives in advance. So you can ask students to help with ideas for assignment development and for completing activities in the course. It allows for student creativity and innovation, and enhances the student's sense of competence and self-worth. It is a cooperative method using collaborative efforts. The group work is mentioned up here. Interactive learning using pair work and group work, real-world contexts through role play, developing meaningful communication, performing classroom tasks, practicing oral communication, and writing to and for real audiences. Whole language education, which is very closely connected to communicative language teaching. Whole language education is a label that has been used to describe cooperative learning, student learning, focus on the community of learners, focus on the social nature of language, use of authentic natural language. It is meaning-centered language and integrates all the 4 skills. What are the 4 skills that we are talking about here? Can anybody identify those for me?
So I can try. Oh, maybe someone else. I see someone else wants to say something.
That's okay. Either one of you can go ahead.
Yeah, Kanzu, you may go ahead, please.
So it's reading, writing, speaking, and I'm leaving one out.
Listening.
Listening. There you go.
Right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Thank you
Yeah.
very much. Yes, very, very well done. Good for you. The whole language approach, whole language instruction deals with teaching to the whole student, the whole being. It looks at not just their linguistic skills, but it also looks at with the student-centered learning and the social nature of language. It looks at the social aspects of learning, as well as social interaction between students. So it's a whole language approach to the education of the whole person. Some additional, this C21 stands for 21st century. So additional 21st century methods. You will come across these also in the Canvas platform and in those 2 handbooks that I referred to. TPR stands for Total Physical Response. It deals with action and talk. So it's very good for young learners, for children, because if you use a song, for instance, to help teach certain words, the song can have actions to it and pictures connected to the song. For instance, you could use the song Old MacDonald Had a Farm. And if we play that out, you know, I do actions as I sing, and you, the students, would do it along with me. Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O, and on this farm he had a chicken, E-I-E-I-O, with a rock rock here and a flock flock there. Here a block block, there a block block, everywhere a block block. Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O. And you see the actions as well as the singing that go along with it. Now, in an actual classroom, I'd have pictures of chickens up on the board, and I might have a picture of a barn up on the board and a nest with eggs in it, that kind of thing. But action and role playing, singing, and talking are also very good for reducing stress. Not only do they coordinate the speech and action, but it helps to make the student of any age, but especially little children, it helps them to feel more relaxed and reduce their stress level. Another method is referred to as immersion. This creates the environment of learning outside of the classroom. So it is oftentimes referred to as a homestay, which is where a student goes to another country and they board in somebody's home. They rent a room in the home of the native speaker of the second language. That becomes a real environment for them to live and communicate in outside of the classroom. So that immersion approach is an excellent way to increase the communication fluency very quickly. A lexical method focuses on vocabularies, idioms, expressions, the slang, local terminology, and it is a very part of a very natural learning process, and it allows the second language learner to become naturalized or assimilated or acculturated into the new environment very quickly. Humanistic methodology is more casual, focuses on the social and emotional priorities with a keen eye on the interests of the students. Learner-centered is need-based. How do you find out what are the needs of your students? How do you discover that information? Anybody?
Possibly asking while pre-assessing. I'm not sure, but maybe the student himself or herself knows better what their needs are.
That's exactly
Right.
right, Irina. That's exactly it. How do you find out the students' needs? You ask them. Now,
Yeah, maybe if it's a child, it's for his developing needs, but I mean skills. If it's like if it's a student, maybe he wants to study abroad. If it's an adult, maybe he wants to read somewhere else, or maybe we
yes,
can make some assumptions, but better to ask, I suppose.
yes, that's very true. And oftentimes with adults, it is connected to employability. Yes, you're exactly right. Now, you see, I have a pretty good idea within this group of students. I have a very good idea of what your needs are and why you are here. You're here to get your certification for teaching English or French in the case of Yasmin El Shrif, teaching English or French as a second language or to speakers of other languages. So I know why you're here, and otherwise I would have asked you why you were here. But I have a pretty good idea because you enrolled in this course. Your reason for being here is patently obvious. So Irina was correct that in a normal classroom situation, you should ask the students, why do they want to study this language and why do they want to communicate in it? There are also some additional methods that we can look at and approaches, different items that are key in their importance. Outcome-based education. In 2017, at the University of Hong Kong, there was a committee struck there to develop an outcome-based curriculum design. What that meant was they came up with a statement to express what they wanted the students to do at the end of the course, what they wanted them to achieve, the terminating objective. They identified that first. And then they did a backwards curriculum design to develop the units that would lead to the outcome they wanted to achieve, they wanted the students to achieve. So that's outcome-based curriculum development. And the mechanism to develop the outcome was the curriculum they created and the assignments that were developed to work through the course and lead towards the outcome. The teaching and learning environment within which we function has altered dramatically in the last 2 years because of the pandemic. Prior to the pandemic, there was online education. It did occur, but it was not the predominant method of delivering educational instruction. Because of the pandemic, online education, such as what we're doing right now, became the normal delivery path around the globe. It had its drawbacks, but it also had its benefits, and has now, I believe, become an entrenched method of instruction delivery. And we will see online education continue and grow into the future in a way that we did not even anticipate 3 years ago. Social interactive approach, SIA, social media. Also during the pandemic, the different social media apps became increasingly important for communication between friends, relatives, interaction, different social interactions with Instagram, WhatsApp, Twitter. What else is there? Telegram, different social media, LinkedIn, all of these different social media platforms became increasingly important and very heavily used during the past 2.5 years. Webinars and online presentations, such as we're doing right now, also became very predominant. A few years ago, before the pandemic, I was teaching a university course in the Bachelor of Education department at a university here in Ontario. And when the pandemic hit, I was required to learn online presentation skills very quickly in order to teach that class online for the first time. So I was learning the presentation skills, and the students in that course were learning for the first time how to participate online. So the learning curve was working on both sides of the equation. And I'm sure during these past couple of years, you have all become much more technically proficient with online learning, with online teaching, with using webinars and that sort of thing. Moocs and e-learning existed before the pandemic, but again, they have developed to an extremely vast level during the past 2.5 years. Can somebody tell me, what does Mooc stand for? That is an acronym. What are the words that it stands for? Anybody?
I'm not really sure, but I suppose the whole idea of Mooc is adapting in-class materials to online materials.
You are
Like maybe
yes,
altering in some, yeah.
yeah, you're absolutely correct, Irina. That's
Well,
exactly.
let me know. Let me know what it stands for, please.
It stands for Massive Open Online Course.
Aha, okay, thank you.
Can you see the cursor moving on the PowerPoint?
No, no, just just the slide. Oh, yes, right now, yes, I do.
Now you
I
can.
can. I
Okay.
can.
So I'm working with two screens. So I'll keep the cursor on this screen. I have
Mhm.
I have the PowerPoint on the other screen as well, but I'll keep it on this screen so you can follow my cursor and see what I'm
Mhm.
pointing to. But it's Massive Open Online Course.
Mhm.
So we will be looking more intently at MOOCs in the future. We do a session on it. You will be writing a paper about it, and some of you will be doing a MOOC project, creating a MOOC course online as well. So any questions about the information on this slide, folks? Any questions at
I
all?
think I think the outcome-based method is a good style of planning a lesson. Just one simple lesson. Maybe it's a good idea for the whole method for a year or something, but for a single lesson, like what you want your student to have at the end of the class, you go
Yes.
back maybe step by step and create your material based on the outcome. Maybe one of the methods. I was just thinking about that.
Yes, you're absolutely right, Irina. And again, a bit later on in the course, when we come to the project, the conversation activities, and the 4 skills
Mhm.
lesson plans, you are asked to create those
Mhm.
assignments for submission. And what I do when we come to those points in a few weeks, I open up a document and we create a conversation activity as a group here in the webinar. And we do exactly that. We identify what is the outcome we want to achieve at the end of the lesson, and then we build the lesson to arrive at the outcome. So you're exactly right. Outcome-based as an approach to curriculum can be used for an individual lesson. It can be used for a unit, a term unit, or it can be used for an entire year-long course. The University of Hong Kong, when they developed their process, the outcome they identified was the outcome at the end of a full 4-year degree. And then they worked backwards to identify what each student would achieve each year along the way to that 4-year degree goal. So it's useful many different ways along the way, many different points. Integrated and online study methods. So here are the different apps and software, web-based. The MOOCs are web-based, online and hybrid courses. We've got social media, Twitter, IMO, Facebook, Instagram, Telegram, WhatsApp. There are lab groups and study groups that can be set up online, and language and conversation exchanges. In the next class, we'll talk about 4 skills teaching of languages and get into the samples of conversation activities. Any questions, folks, about that PowerPoint information?
No, that was very clear. I just have another question. So basically, our classes, our webinars will be looking like flipped learning, right? So we'll be studying something in advance, like modules, and then we will be talking about them during webinars, right? Because we're just talking about things that are in module 1, and I'm just curious if whether I went further and look at this ahead, or I'm not I don't know, I'm just trying to understand the idea, because I like the idea when we learn something before you decide, you describe this,
Yeah,
you talk about this.
and that's a very good question, Irina.
Hmm.
I would encourage you to work through the Canvas platform ahead of time. And
Hmm.
when I was doing it in June of 2020, of course, that was the early days of the pandemic and everything was locked down. So we were not allowed to go anywhere. Everything was restricted and closed. And I had a lot of free time on my hands. So I worked through the Canvas platform and I worked through the early modules very quickly. And I was always ahead of where the webinars were talking about. But I agree it was very good for me to read about it first, and then it was reinforced during the webinars.
Yes,
So
absolutely. That's very.
yeah,
Hmm.
I would encourage you to work at a fairly brisk pace through the early modules, especially, and be sure to do all the individual day quizzes, the grammar day quizzes, all the way along through the platform. And if you if you're reading ahead of the webinars, that's not a problem.
Hmm. That is very helpful actually to see, to hear some information for the second time, because repetition is everything.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it has been scientifically studied that we need to hear something 7 times
Mm.
before we understand it and know it very well.
7 times you said. What about the 21-day rule that you need to repeat something 21 days in a row or 21 times?
Yes,
Or just, uh-huh.
that's also a very important thing to keep in mind.
Perfect. Thank you. Mm.
So I'm just trying to find something quickly here. Have you ever heard of Ebbinghaus?
Is it a TV show?
No.
No.
Maybe it's a curved line that indicates the memory to say that decision or what?
Cindy, you are absolutely correct.
Oh, thank you.
I'm just going to the internet here and I'll share my screen with you. So, as Cindy mentioned, it is a curve, the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. Hermann Ebbinghaus was a German psychologist who pioneered the experimental study of memory and is known for his discovery of the forgetting curve and the spacing effect. He was also the first person to describe the learning curve. He was the father of neo-Cartesian philosopher Julius Ebbinghaus. So the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve is this, and it shows that after an amount of time, a number of days, this being 30 days, at the first day, we have almost 100% recall of information we hear. So right now, immediately after I have given you this presentation, if I ask the question, what was the oldest methodology that we talked about in the PowerPoint a few minutes ago? What was the name of that methodology that existed for centuries? Can somebody tell me the name of that original methodology?
Grammar transition method?
That's exactly correct, Irina. Yes. So you see, immediately after hearing it, so within a few minutes of hearing it, you have 100% recall. If I don't talk about it again for several days, I might ask you 2 weeks from now, what is the name of that oldest methodology? The probability of you remembering it has dropped dramatically. And after 30 days, you will almost lose total recall of the information that we did today. That's why reading the material on your own time, and then hearing the material in the webinar, it's repeated, that's twice. And then if you read it again as you prepare assignments, and then if you make study notes for yourself along the way through the course, that's what I did, because I knew there was going to be a final exam someday. So all the way through the course, I was making study notes for myself of key points that I thought were important. And then later I could review my study notes, and it just reinforced what I had originally read, what I had heard in the webinars, and it helped me to remember that. So the forgetting curve is definitely connected to that 21-day rule that was just mentioned a few moments ago, because after 21 days, we have which would be somewhere right about in here. Here's 1 day, 2 days, 30 days. So 21 days would be about here, and you see you've lost most of the memorized information. Okay, any questions or comments about that, folks?
So I'm just curious if we kept repeating the same information for 21 days, so how that curve would look like? It would be straight line, but then it will probably go down again.
Well, it would be a much straighter line for the 21 days for sure, but
And then
it would eventually drop off if you, as soon as
yeah,
we stop repeating information, as soon as we stop looking at information, the line begins to drop off.
yes, yeah, we need to repeat from time to time, especially with students. Yes,
Right.
thank you.
Exactly. So you could take this curved line, you could shift it to the right. You could put it here again.
Thank you for the thought. Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome. So that's the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve.
I have a question with regards to assignments.
Yes.
If you could just go through the Canvas page and just familiarize us as to how and when we would be doing an assignment.
Very good. I will certainly, I'll start that process today with you. I won't discuss all the assignments today, but we'll just look at the, first look at the modules section. And today I'm just going to talk to you about your first assignment. So if you scroll down through the modules, now as you read this, and be sure to do every quiz along the way, right? You need to do that to make sure everything opens up properly for you later. And they also form part of your final mark. So if you skip over some quizzes, it will be an incomplete course for you and you won't get a final mark. So do these as you come across them along the way, and then you make sure you've got them all done. But if we scroll down to I went too far, sorry. Scrolled right past to it. After Grammar Day 4, so go to your Canvas platform, go to Second Language Acquisition, go to this page. On this page, this is an excellent video by Noam Chomsky, brilliant man, linguistic expert and specialist. Listen to that video for sure. But scroll down this page and you'll see assignment 1. Your very first assignment is called Foundation Essay. So you are asked to choose one of these 8 topics. So scroll through these topics, read them through, and decide which topic you want to write about. And then you're asked to type a paper on just regular 8.5 by 11 inch paper. Leave a margin on the left-hand side for comments by whoever is marking your paper. I might be marking some of them, but I don't mark all of them. The paper is expected to be between 2 to 5 pages. So you're writing between 2 to 5 pages of your response to one of these topics. That's your first assignment. Now, When is that assignment due? I would suggest that you should have that assignment completed within the next couple of weeks. Every time an assignment is given to you, if you complete it within 2 weeks and email it to info@tesolcanada.org, you're given the email address right there. If you email each assignment within 2 to 3 weeks of when it was first brought to your attention, then you will keep yourself on pace with completing the course in the anticipated length of time. Now, as Dr. Valley mentioned a bit earlier, these are not rigid deadlines. So if you do not submit your foundation paper in the next 2 weeks, maybe you submit it a month from now. That's not a problem. You will not lose marks, but that simply will delay your ultimate graduation and completion of the course. So you are very largely in control of the process of your individual course, and you can determine how quickly you actually complete the course. Does that help to answer the question about the assignments?
Yes, thank you so much.
And I'm only
Sorry,
telling, that's fine. I'm only telling you about that first assignment because if I tell you about all the assignments right now and explain them in detail, it will become overwhelming.
Yes, thank you.
You'll also forget about the others. Time will go past. So the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve will come into play. You would forget about it and I'd have to do it again anyway when we come to it in the course. So we will come to each assignment in a timely fashion, but right now just focus on your foundation essay, that first paper. Okay?
Thank you.
Are there any questions, folks?
Of course, is this assignment has to be handwritten or typed?
Typed is definitely
Typed.
preferred.
Preferred. Okay, all right. And 2 to 5 pages, is it on just one side or on both sides? I mean, okay, doesn't matter when it's typed. Okay, I don't need to print it. Oh, sorry, just a stupid question. Thank you.
No,
Sorry.
no, it's not a stupid question. Every question is a good question. So
I was just thinking about printing it. Why? All right.
2 to 5 pages printed on one side.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you.
Okay? And we ask you to type it simply because if you handwrite it and submit it as a PDF, sometimes we have a problem reading people's handwriting. If we can't read what you've written, handwritten, then we're not able to give you a mark. So that's why typing works so much better. Okay, any other questions, folks?
Hello, I have a question. So, you've mentioned that the new version or assignment or things will be updated like tomorrow. I'm wondering that does it keep the quiz I've finished?
Oh, yes, yes. So
Okay.
when Dr. Valley said that when he was talking earlier, Cindy, he said that assignment deadlines would be updated by tomorrow.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
So it doesn't affect the quiz and things
no,
like that.
no,
Okay.
because when they do administrative changes
Mm-hmm.
on the Canvas platform, they're just going in and updating specific little details.
Okay, I got it. Mostly the due time date.
Right.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. So anything that each of you completes on your own Canvas platform account, any of the quizzes, and when you submit an assignment and then you're given a mark that's put on the Canvas platform, each of those items is, and I'm showing what's under the assignments tab here on your Canvas platform. So each of those assignments that you complete, you're given a mark and it's put up on the Canvas platform, but your account continues to maintain that information And it's not lost whenever TESOL does an updated administrative change. Okay, so you can see here on the Canvas platform, for instance, the TCBE, the final board exam, the national board exam, it has a due date of July 4th. Well, that was today, because this past weekend, the last couple of days, the students have been writing this exam. So that's an old due date. And June 27th was the old due date from a couple of weeks ago, I guess a week ago, that the midterm exam occurred for some students. So those are old due dates. So it's these due dates that TESOL administration will update, but it will not affect your quiz points that you have registered. Because when you do each quiz, for instance, your Grammar Day 2 quiz, it says,
Mhm.
2 attempts are allowed. And so if I want to go and take the quiz, which it won't let me do because I only have an administrative view of the modules. I don't have an active, this is not my active account. This is an administrative view of all the quizzes, so I can't show you the actual quiz. But when you take that quiz, it will give you an immediate mark. And there are 10 questions. And when you take the quiz, it will give you a mark in here. It will say attempts completed, 1, attempt completed. It will give you the mark it's a mark out of 20. There are 10 questions, 2 points per mark. And if you're not happy with your first attempt, you can do a second attempt. But then it will hold that mark for you. It will hold the highest mark that you get in each quiz. So that's how the quizzes work. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Actually, I wanted to ask you one more question. If I have something unclear about, to be specific, while I was studying day 1, module 1, there was some grammar about sentence sentence types, and one sentence was marked as exclamation, and actually I have no idea why. So whom should I ask these questions, like about these modules, about these I have a screenshot of that, so I can email it to someone, or should I ask while on webinars?
Oh, you can ask right here on the webinar. So was it
Yeah, right here inside this one. Yeah.
inside the PowerPoint?
Yes. So there were 11 sentences. Yes, right here. I mean, a little bit further. A little bit further, further, further. 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 Yes, number 7. It says, oh my gosh, something like, so here you see, they say, check your answers. Number 7 is imperative. If you go back and read number 7, to me is a pure exclamatory exclamation. I mean, I'm confused right now. Exclamatory or exclamation? No, exclamatory.
Exclamatory.
Exclamatory. Yes, it says, "Oh my gosh, I lost my wallet at the concert." Why is that imperative? There's no comments, there's no requests, there's nothing about wishes.
Well,
It's pure exclamation. It's pure. It says actually to distinguish between imperative and exclamatory, you just need to pay attention that in exclamatory sentence there will be emotions, and here I can see pure emotions. Like somebody is not happy.
well, I just did a quick Google search for imperative sentence. It says a sentence that expresses a direct command. Can you see this Google search on the screen?
Yeah.
An imperative sentence is a sentence that expresses a direct command, request, invitation,
Yes.
warning, or instruction.
Absolutely. No emotions.
Do not have a subject. Instead, a directive is given to an implied second person. For example, the sentence, wash the dinner plates, commands the implied subject to wash the dishes.
And there's actually a great explanation in the slide before about sentences, and I was confused. Before that. Yeah, exclamatory and imperative.
Yes. So that's the same definition we just read.
Yeah, so in that sentence, oh my gosh, I lost my wallet. There is no command. There is no request. I don't see anything like that.
I agree with you.
No.
I would say
Yeah.
I would say this is exclamatory.
All right. Okay. I'm happy.
I would totally agree with you.
I see.
So
Yeah, if I can interrupt you guys and yes, I have a couple of comments regarding grammar when it comes to using the future perfect continuous. When I because I already had access, so I went through some grammar exams and quizzes. So I found that there are a little bit of confusion, but where exactly I don't have it now because I'm already outside. But I can give you further like notes where exactly in which slide and which text was it.
and that's fine, and I understand the confusion that you might have encountered. There were a few spots at different points in the Canvas platform where I, as a native English speaker, thought to myself, that's not what I would say about that point, or I would disagree with something. I didn't let it bother me too much. I just kept on going because in everything there are always some typographical errors, or there might be an incorrect label. As I agree with Irina that I think this is an incorrect label.
I totally agree with you, but actually, one of the next steps after the slides are finished, we have a quiz, and in that quiz, they ask you to determine whether a sentence imperative or exclamatory or interrogative, and they use similar sentences. That's why I was confused. I actually got it okay,
Yeah,
20 out of 20, but actually, I was thinking about my. I was thinking my way. Uh,
and that's
so
fine. If
that's
you
why I
got
asked.
that, no, that's just fine. Every question is a good question, and if you got 20 out of 20, then you were doing very well. You thought correctly about it.
But not on the next one. I actually advise everyone to think more deeply about the second quiz sentences. Uh, I got 14 out of 20, but actually my mistake.
Sure,
Uh,
and that's fine. I mean, a 14 out of 20 is a good mark as well. So that's just fine. And don't be too concerned about about the mark that you get out of 20, because there are a lot of quizzes, and all these marks are added and they're all brought down into a final number for your quiz results. So
so how is this important to understand whether here is a complex or compound complex or a simple sentence in front of me? Because I was trying to understand, and I'm still a little bit confused, but I think it is very important. It makes your speech, it makes your writing absolutely amazing if you understand these things or not. Do you think about okay, should I write compound sentence or complex sentence or compound complex sentence?
yes, and well, that depends on what the context is and what you're trying to accomplish. So, here's the Google definition of a compound complex sentence. It has two independent clauses joined to one or more dependent clauses.
Yeah, but it's not that easy. While I was doing the second quiz, it's not that easy.
I understand. So I found it helpful to do Google searches for these different things, and see examples. So these examples helped me to understand it as I was going through the course.
Yes.
Because
Should think more.
even as a native English speaker, I grew up in Canada. I
Mhm.
grew up in an English-speaking education system. But when I was in elementary school, the education system changed here in Ontario, and they stopped teaching us grammar. Because at that point, back in the 1960s, the late 1950s and 1960s, it was believed that grammar was not important. And
I see.
they stopped teaching us grammar rules. So when I started into the TESOL course 2 years ago, I mean, I'm almost 70 years old. So for over half a century, I had not been paying any attention to grammar rules. I didn't know about a lot of the grammar rules and the terminology.
Mhm.
So when I came into the TESOL course, I started learning more about grammar than I've known for half a century, even though I've been speaking it all this time.
That is helpful to know. Thank you. That is supportive. Thank you for your time,
You're welcome.
for
So
explanations.
I wouldn't hesitate to go to Google search or your web browser and type in labels such as compound complex sentences, get some quick examples, and it'll help you understand what it means and how to build these. So that's compound complex because the two independent phrases, when I grow up, and my mom is proud of me, those two independent phrases are linked by another one. When I grow up, I want to be a ballerina, and my mom is proud of me. Now, I'm just reading what's on the page. I don't really want to be a ballerina when I grow up. I don't think I would look very good in a pink tutu.
Yeah, it's clear when you see, some, what is it called? The coordinative, subjunctive or subordinative. But when you don't see them in the quiz, there were sentences when it's not obvious, and you have to. And actually, there was a sentence consisting of 3 lines, and I got it wrong because I put something like complex, compound, and actually there was a simple sentence, just a simple sentence.
Yes, I understand. I understand. No,
Yeah.
I did the same thing. In those quizzes, I often would get things wrong. So, I would typically get a quiz mark of 14 or 16 out of 20 on those
Mhm.
quizzes. That was often what I was getting as a mark. But there were a couple of times when I got a 12 out of 20, and I was not happy.
Mhm.
There was one quiz that I can't remember which one it was, but there was one quiz I did it the second time, and you only get 2 attempts. And
Yes.
in the second time, I got 10 out of 20 instead of 12, so they kept my 12
Mm.
20 mark. And I'm thinking, I grew up speaking English, and I can't get the quizzes right. So,
I see. So if you get the second time fewer points, what do they keep? The highest or the lowest mark?
no, they keep the highest mark.
They keep the highest. Okay, that's better.
Yes, absolutely.
Sure. Sure. Thank you.
And I see the little note in the chat box from Kanzel. Thank you very much for that note. The New First Aid in English is a great book to give you all the foundational rules in English grammar. That's good to know.
Yeah, it's an amazing book.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Very good. All right, folks, do we have any other questions that you might have? Any other questions about anything connected to the course or the Canvas platform? In the chat box, I just typed my email address for you. If you have questions between the webinars, if you've got a question tomorrow or the next day related to the course, you can always send me an email. I always do my best to reply within a day or so. So I respond to you fairly quickly.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, you're very welcome. So I know the webinar email that was sent out, it said the time of these webinars was beginning at 10 o'clock Vancouver time and would finish at 11:30 Vancouver time. So the webinars are set up to be 1.5 hours long. Well, you will find with most of the webinars that I run, most of them run closer to 2 hours because I just cannot share all the information I need to share in 1.5 hours. I try to be as concise as possible, but I also want to encourage participation from you and questions and comments from you. So I don't want to cut anybody out of anything. So you should plan with my webinars to probably aim for a 2-hour session on Mondays. Now, the lady who delivers the sessions on Saturday, Elham Misagi, she sticks closer to the 1.5 hour time frame. But I just wanted to mention that you can expect my sessions to usually be about 2 hours, okay? Does anybody have any questions before we part today?
Daniel, in the event that we can't make a webinar, we will have access to the recording. I recall seeing in the email within 72 hours it will be posted.
Yes, that's exactly right. Let me show you where the webinars are posted. Thank you very much.
Oh, yes, please. Yes.
Oh, goodness, because I'm on this advanced platform, that this is not an active student platform because I've just been given administrative access to it so I can show it to you. It doesn't show. I'm going to go back to the older TESOL platform. Oh, that's not helping me either. This is the older TESOL certification platform. I'm not seeing it here. Just let me see if I can come up with one that. No, it's not helping me. So on your TESOL platform, on your Canvas platform, on this menu list, you will see an item called Announcements. So right in here under Modules, you'll see Announcements.
Mhm.
And if you go under Announcements, you will find the recordings of past webinars. I don't know if any of you are able to look at that right now, but if you go to your Canvas platform.
Sure. There is an announcement
So
menu
if
item.
you open that Announcements tab, click on
Okay.
Announcements, you will see recordings of a lot of the past webinars. Just about everyone is up there. There are a few recent ones that have yet to be posted, but you can go back and see webinars for the past 1.5 years. And so you can watch recordings. If you miss a class, you can go to that Announcements tab and you can look for the recording of the day you missed. And if it's not posted yet, you can scroll back through recordings during the past year and you can find an older recording of that topic. So
Okay.
every time I give a webinar, so this first webinar that I do, they're all very similar. Every time I do the first webinar, they're very similar. However, I do say slightly different things every time because I'm not speaking with a script. But you can see older webinars titled Methodologies and Introduction webinars. You can see those under the Announcements tab. So does that help answer that?
Actually, my announcement item is empty. Nothing. I don't see any older versions of your webinars. Maybe not yet. I'm not sure.
Well, because you're newly signed up to the course.
Okay, as
So
the director mentioned, within a few weeks, for a few days.
Within a few days, I would expect. I
All
know
right.
they have several webinars that they're planning to upload, so you should be able to see them fairly soon, Irina. Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Mhm.
Those recorded webinars, once they're up there, they're also a very good way of studying for the exam. All right, folks. Any final questions before we leave for the day? All right, then all the best with this week. Hope everything goes well for you, and I look forward to seeing you again next Monday here. And as I said, if you have any questions during the week, send me an email. I'll reply to you fairly quickly. And I am now going to stop the recording.